Good day, everyone. Today we're going to be doing chapter 3, paragraph 4. We'll probably get to either paragraph 6 or 7. So let's get started on paragraph 4. Observation and thinking are the 2 points of departure for all the spiritual striving of man, insofar as he is conscious of such striving. The workings of common sense, as well as the most complicated scientific researches, rest on these 2 fundamental pillars of our spirit. Philosophers have started from various primary antitheses: idea and reality, subject and object, appearance and thing in itself, I and not I, idea and will, concept and matter, force and substance, the conscious and the unconscious. It is easy to show, however, that all these antitheses must be preceded by that of observation and thinking, this being for man the most important one. And the summary for that is: observation and thinking are the foundation pillars of human understanding and spiritual striving. And he pretty much explains, if you've ever done any sort of philosophy reading or whatnot, there's when we're trying to figure out how we make sense of this world, there's always 2 different opposing things we try and base our foundation of our understanding of the world. Like one is concept and matter. He mentions a bunch of them here. Like, we'll take concept and matter for example, and if you think about it, it's like, can we use the concept and matter to make sense of this world? Well, if you think about it, how do you get to matter? It's through observation. How do you get through concept? You get it through thinking. So how do if you look at all of these, you realize that what precedes them, what comes before them, is thinking and observing. That's your basis for understanding the world. We'll take another example, is force and substance. How do you come to force? How do you come to understand force? And how do you come to understand substance? It's through observing, and it's through thinking. And the other ones are subject and object. How do you come to that? It all boils down to thinking and observing, and that is basically, he hammers that home numerous times in this chapter, and that's what you have to get clear in your mind, is that the basis for understanding our world boils down to observation of things and whatnot, and of thinking. And that's because thinking leads to concepts, which leads to, theories and all that other stuff, but thinking comes first. Okay? So paragraph 5 is: whatever principle we choose to lay down, we must either prove that somewhere we have observed it, or we must enunciate it in the form of a clear thought which can be rethought by any other thinker. Every philosopher who sets out to discuss his fundamental principles must express them in conceptual form and thus use thinking. He therefore indirectly admits that his activity presupposes thinking. Whether thinking or something else is the chief factor in the evolution of the world will not be decided at this point, but that without thinking the philosopher can gain no knowledge of such evolution is clear from the start. In the occurrence of the world phenomena, thinking may play a minor part, but in the forming of a view about them, there can be no doubt that its part is a leading one. The summary for that is: in order to establish any principle, we must either prove that we have observed it, or we must express it in the form of a clear thought that anyone else can rethink. Hence, thinking is a prerequisite for putting things into conceptual form. Okay, so again, he points out again that anybody who has principles or ideas and expresses them in conceptual form, they automatically use thinking. So again, he's pointing out that thinking is your first reference point for understanding the world. Okay, we're going to move on to paragraph 6. As regards observation, our need of it is due to the way we are constituted. Our thinking about a horse and the object horse are two things which for us emerge apart from each other. This object is accessible to us only by means of observation. As little as we can form a concept of a horse by merely staring at the animal, just as little are we able by mere thinking to produce a corresponding object. The summary for 6 is, due to our constitution, an object is only accessible to for us through observation, which is separate and distinct from thinking. So, I mean, he basically his point is made at the end of that paragraph, is that, you don't through thinking just make objects. I mean, and you can't produce objects through thinking. I mean, you'd have to, you need to observe things, and I mean, it's just the way we are made, right? I mean, you formulate observations through the senses that we have, and thinking isn't going to make observations happen. I mean, you have to be presented with observations through your daily life or whatnot. I mean, if you using a microscope, for example, I mean, you can't think of a microscope and there's one right in front of you. I mean, when you're forming concepts about a microscope or whatnot, you have to think, and then to observe a microscope, you'd have to actually be in front of one or whatnot. You can't just, I think that's obviously his main point in that paragraph. So paragraph 7, in sequence of time, observation does in fact come before thinking. For even thinking we must get to know first through observation. It was essentially a description of an observation when at the beginning of this chapter we gave an account of how thinking lights up in the presence of an event and goes beyond what is merely presented. Everything that enters the circle of our experience we first become aware of through observation. The content of sensation, perception, and contemplation, all feelings, acts of will, dreams and fancies, mental pictures, concepts and ideas, all illusions and hallucinations are given to us through observation. And the summary for that is, observation precedes thinking and anything we experience. So when we talk to our friends about dreams or mental pictures, like little ideas we have, these are all things that we're observing. So observation doesn't necessarily mean physical things too. It mean observation of your feelings, like something you may not see, but what precedes that is you're observing it. And he's correct in saying in sequence of time, observation does come, in fact, before thinking, unless you've observed an object numerous times, and then this is going to happen, and then I guess in that sense, there's a little loophole for that. In that sense, thinking would come before observation because you're predicting things, but prediction is based on observation of things. And observing patterns of behavior or whatnot. So it's also important to make note of that observation comes before thinking. And that's basically the summary for that. I'm going to end this session off, so I will see you next time, and happy thinking!